Hi guys, welcome back to Binge Watch with Brittany. We are covering our second episode. We're going to be talking about Power Book 2, Season 2, giving you guys the recap and my review of everything that happened. So I realized in my Season 1 video that I forgot to mention that they, after Tasha was given a deal to basically say that Tommy killed Ghost, she was given witness protection, and then Cooper Sachs was forced to resign from his position as DA. So to get out of this whole situation with having to deal with Tommy, and she's clearly very mad at Tasha and Tariq for everything that happened with Ghost, they decide to fake Tommy's death. So first they stage a car chase. Tasha is running errands and Cooper's in the back seat, just kind of keeping an eye out for when Tommy's going to appear. And so they go on a little chase, and they end up having the cops kind of like chase after Tommy, and he ends up crashing at this gas station, and his car explodes, and so that just kind of ties up everything nicely for them. Tasha goes off to witness protection, and Yaz goes to Big Mama's house to stay with her, and then obviously Tariq goes back to Stansfield. So in Season 2, what we have is Cooper Sachs. He's now working with Davis. This is really awesome because it gives them another perspective in terms of working through their cases and just having a leg up as far as having someone who used to work for the DA, who used to work for the prosecution, and has basically seen that side of things in terms of many different cases, to know how things work and how he can actually help Davis with his case and defending his client. We also know that Cooper is still seeing Jenny Sullivan, who is the DA, and he's able to get tips here and there that will help Davis with his own cases. So this is actually a really good setup for Cooper Sachs. He's making a lot of money, he's dressing better, and there's a lot of hope for me at least, that he can actually embrace this role and do the right thing in terms of defending his clients, doing everything he can to point out how the government is taking advantage of how they're not handling cases correctly, and do what he can for them to get them off the hook for whatever charges they are facing. So we have Tariq fresh off of killing Jabari. He ends up going on a hunting trip with the Westerns. And so what's interesting is that even though he is rich and he's around rich classmates, people who are white and who do these types of things, he goes on a hunting trip with the Westerns. He doesn't really know the protocol. And so they're waiting in the woods, they're waiting in a tent, and they're just kind of waiting for deer to come by so they can shoot them. A deer does come by. I can't recall who fires off the shot, but Tariq ends up standing up right away, and he almost gets shot himself. And this is just interesting because, again, he's kind of like involved in this game that he doesn't know anything about, and he kind of has to learn on the fly of the seat of his pants. And this is just like how he is in the drug game. He may have learned a lot from Tasha, from Ghost, from Tommy, but he really has to figure out on his own what he's doing. And so when they catch up with the deer, obviously the rest of Braden's family comes around, and they're like, hey, you shouldn't have done that. That's not what you do when we're hunting. To make it up for you, they will give you the kill shot. And so Tariq is kind of like in shock at this point. He's flashing back to when he killed his dad, to when he killed Jabari, and he's actually not able to take the kill shot. And for me, this is really interesting because, in my opinion, he's only ever shot Ghost and Jabari because he had to do that in order to survive. In this environment, this is really just a sport. This is just for fun. And so I think he really is hesitating to do this because killing this deer is not something that's going to help him survive. It's something that's pointless and it's not necessary. And so I think it's really good that he's having this moment where he can't kill something, he can't kill a being. And I think that this humanizes him a little bit because people are pointing him out, making him out to be a monster, and I don't think he really is. That he's literally just doing what he has to do to survive. So now moving into my next topic. So at this point, cops think that there's a connection between Jabari and Ramirez because they end up finding Ramirez's body. So what happens is in season 1, we have Cain killing Ramirez for whatever reason. He just doesn't like what Ramirez says to him. He throws the body in a pond, and when everything happens with Jabari, him and Tariq have a plan to frame Ramirez for killing Jabari, and so he gets Braden to come with him to dig up the body and plant the gun. Ken is also using Braden to get to Tariq, so he's bringing him around a little bit more, and he is kind of trying to pit them against each other and get Braden to his side. So then next up, we have Carrie finally IDing Jabari's body. She's clearly heartbroken. Detective Whitman is also kind of surprised by her reaction to seeing Jabari, and so he figures out that they were intimate, and then we also realize that she was intimate with Detective Whitman as well. And so at this point, the situation is just getting messy because we know that she's messing with Zeke, we know that she has history and was actively messing with Jabari, and then now you have Detective Whitman who's getting into the mix, and he is clearly kind of obsessed and not happy with everything that happened between him and Carrie. So then we know that Tariq has a burner phone, and he's using that phone to communicate with his mom. I think he also used that phone to communicate with Jabari, and he, from his end, erased those messages from his phone, but the police have Jabari's phone, and so Detective Whitman calls Tariq's burner, and luckily Tariq doesn't say anything because he doesn't know who's calling him. It's not a number that he has like stored in his phone or whatever, so he doesn't say anything, and he realizes that it's the police calling him, and he hangs up, but they're able to trace the call, and they figure out that the call came from Sansfield. So he ends up having to get rid of the phone in order to keep himself out of trouble. And the one reason why he answered that call is because at this point he's trying to get in touch with his mom to get advice on what he should do, and he thinks it's her calling him. So moving on to Drew. So Drew is recovering from a gunshot wound. In season 1, I didn't touch on this, but there was an issue with their Connect Rico, and Rico ended up firing on the bar in retaliation for something, and Drew was so stupid. He was obviously hiding when the shots were being sprayed, and he literally stands straight up and tries to run to the back to get a weapon so that he can defend everyone, and he ends up getting shot in the back, and luckily he survives. And so now, because of all of this happening, Monet really wants to rush the timeline as far as getting Zeke to the NBA. Mainly their goal was just to get him to the NBA, but now they want to get him to the NBA so that they can basically live off of him and work for him instead of working in the drug gang. And for me, I talked about in the previous episode that I didn't think that Zeke was believable as an athlete, and so for me, this just doesn't seem like this is going to work out for them very well, because in the real world, Zeke is not a top draft pick, and obviously Zeke has no say in terms of when he's going to go pro and if he's ready to go pro, being that he wasn't playing games for a while because he wasn't academically eligible. And so I think that this is just a messy plan. We don't know how it's going to play out yet. Obviously, I finished the all 3 seasons, so I know how this plays out, but I just think that right now this is a horrible plan for Monet to have as her backup plan. So we also know that Cain is kind of like forced out of the family because of all of these bad decisions that he's making, and he ends up finding a new connect. I obviously know at this point that the connect is Monet's ex-boyfriend from when she was younger. Cain does not know any of this. He just thinks that he's getting put on with a new connect and kind of like moving on up in the drug world, and he's just seeing the next level of things because Mecca is way more connected, has way more money than the Tejados, and so this is just a good exposure for him. He just doesn't know that he's being manipulated. And so Cain tries to go to Monet and said, hey, I have a new connect, let's meet up with him, let's get back on track, and she's not trying to hear it, so obviously Cain has to come up with something to get them to the table. So I'm just going to move on to the next point that I want to talk about. So again, we have the love triangle with Tyreek, Lauren, and Diana. We also have Effie in the mix. So Tyreek is hooking up with Lauren because he sees her every day in school. She's getting annoyed because he's always distracted. We have Diana coming around here and there. And he's kind of getting closer with her. And then we also have Effie who's coming around. She goes to a different school, and she is just kind of getting more in the mix and helping them to make money so that Tyreek can pay off the bills that he has from dealing with his sister and dealing with his mom, and then Two-Bit coming after him and all of this stuff. We also learned that Davis has a brother, Theo, who is in jail. Theo is sick, and Davis is still trying to get him out. I think they say what he has, but I can't recall what it is. But this is just another reason why he wants to get his brother out of jail. We also find out that there is evidence that the real killer is 3 to 4 inches taller than Theo is. That means that he's covering for someone. So next up, I want to talk about how Kane is able to get back in his family's good graces. And so what happens is we have Monet and Diana going on a shopping spree. They're just buying everything up, and you find out that it's basically just a front for them to get boxes to empty and bags to empty and just fill it up with drugs and give that to Braden and Tyreek. So they give those drugs to Braden and Tyreek. Braden is driving a family car. He actually moves the drugs to one place, and then he moves them to a second place in a garage. And what we later find out is that Kane switched out the drugs with sugar. And we find this out because Effie is obviously dealing with that batch, and whoever she's dealing to realizes that the drugs have been stepped on, meaning that they have been basically diluted in power, so it's not just pure whatever it's supposed to be, it's mixed in, there's other stuff mixed in. And so Effie gets in trouble. She has to call them to help her figure it out. And then we have Tyreek and Diana having a conversation at some point, and they're trying to really think about, hey, who has the most to gain from us meeting with this new connect? And they realize that it's Kane who basically set everything in motion and switched out the real drug with sugar. Next I want to move into Tate. So I didn't really talk about Tate in season 1. I can't remember how exactly he tied into OG Power, but he is a politician. He is dirty. He does have connection to all of these different drug dealers and all of these shady people, both in the drug world and in politics. And so whatever campaign he's running for, he actually loses, and he's pouting on his brother's couch, and his brother's like tired of him being there and just tells him, hey, you need to figure out what you're going to do next. You need to get out of my place and whatever. And so he decides that as his comeback, he's going to go after Sweeney's spot. Sweeney is a family friend of the Westons, and when Tyreek was on his hunting trip, there was this really private photo album that they kind of were showing around, and Tyreek had it, but Trace took it from him because technically he shouldn't have been able to see it because he wasn't a member of whatever kind of like club or group that they were part of. And so in that photo album is incriminating pictures or just really bad pictures of Sweeney. And so he ends up making a deal with Tyreek because Tyreek needs to get someone with power to back him up in terms of getting his sister Yaz out of foster care. And then Tate obviously wants evidence to make Sweeney look bad. And so I just want to touch on why Tyreek needs someone with power to help him. So we learned early on that Yaz is with Big Mama. Big Mama is just not really able to take care of her. On top of that, she's misusing funds for Yaz to fuel her alcohol addiction at this point, and so she's just not really taking good care of Yaz. And so Yaz is in foster care, and Tyreek is trying to do everything that he can to get her out of foster care and take care of her himself. And so obviously, being that he's 19, he's a drug dealer, he's living in the dorm, he doesn't really have the means to, at least right now, to show that he can take care of Yaz. So he needs to get someone to speak up for him. He needs to find a place to live, which he gets from Lauren. It was her brother's apartment, and so it's just kind of free for him to use. And then he also needs to show proof of income. So he's able to get Braden to sign some paperwork saying that he is the president basically, I don't know if it's necessarily the course correct business, but has some LLC that Bash helps him create, and he gets Braden Weston, to sign it saying that he's the president, and that gives him legitimate checks that he can show to the government to say that he's able to take care of his sister. So what happens is we have a bunch of different things happening, but Monet at some point asked Tariq if he was involved in Jabari's murder. He lies. She finds out that he's lying. And so when he has his court case for she makes him get in the car, locks the door, and she's effectively making him late for his meeting so that he can understand what it feels like to lose something that's really important to him, because Tariq is really valuable to her organization, but she's also trying to put him in his place so that she has him back under control. And so how this backfires on Monet is because Monet thinks she knows everything. She thinks she's running everything. And Tariq tells her what's what. He tells her that Drew is still seeing Everett, and Everett is Drew's boyfriend, who outed Drew when Carrie and Jabari were having their investigation to kind of figure out what happened with the dead guy in the pool. He also reveals that Diana is stealing money from the safe, and Monet needed that money to pay for something. I think it was something to do with Rico, but it wasn't there, and she didn't know what happened to it. And then she was out of the loop on Kane switching out the drugs with sugar. Diana knew and could have told her, but didn't. And so Tariq had that as leverage. And so Monet realizes that she doesn't really know as much as she thinks she does, so she lets Tariq go. So Tariq ends up making it to his court case, and he actually gets custody of his sister, but he's later arrested for murder and loses custody of his sister. I want to move on to this next topic, Lauren. So we have Lauren, who is caught with drugs. She is manipulated and lied to by the police and by Carrie, and she's forced to wear a wire. Carrie is obviously encouraging her to wear the wire because she's trying to protect herself and Zeke. She lies to Lauren and tells her that they were going after Braden, not Tariq. So Lauren is willing to do this to protect Tariq. So what happens is Lauren is given a watch that records audio, and she gets Braden and Kane on the wire. And this is a huge deal because Braden is obviously connected to Tariq, and Kane is obviously connected to the Tejada family. So this loops everything together, the police having this audio recording. And so she is forced to testify in court. And what happens is they're in court. The prosecution reveals that they have this audio tape. They break for the day so that Tariq's people can listen to the recording, and they're not supposed to let Tariq listen to it because it will compromise the identity of the person who's doing the recording, right? And so Tariq and Davis are in Davis's office. Davis has his laptop out, and he lets Tariq listen to the recording. He has his laptop open. He leaves the room, basically tells Tariq how to play it, and Tariq finds out that Lauren is the one who did the recording. So I can't recall if Tariq tells Braden or if he just tells Effie that Lauren was caught in the recording. Effie knows that this is problematic, and she tells Kane, and so Kane is like, hey, Braden, we're caught on a wire, you need to get rid of Lauren. And so this is not something that Braden wants to do because he was supposed to kill somebody earlier on in the season, and he couldn't do it, so Tariq had to do it. And so now he's being asked again to kill somebody, and he's not up to it. And Effie knows that he is not going to be able to do this. So this is huge for what happened later, because Tariq is trying to get Lauren out of town. He calls Braden, who's actually already outside of Lauren's building because he's trying to kill her, and he tells Lauren to go with Braden, and they are driving away, and Braden is obviously thinking about what he should do. Should he kill her? Should he help her get away? And so he ends up doing the right thing, and he helps her to get away, but Effie is following him, and she basically takes Lauren from him, knocks Lauren out, and puts her in the car, and we later find out that Lauren died in a car crash. The next big thing that happens is that Zeke is picked up for questioning. So this is probably the most stupidest thing to have happened all season, or probably in all 3 seasons that I've watched. So we know that from season 1 that Zeke is completely out of the loop. He doesn't know what's going on, so as a result, he doesn't know the right answers to give. So he is picked up by Detective Whitman for questioning. At this point, Detective Whitman knows about Zeke and Carrie. He's just trying to corroborate what Carrie told him as far as her alibi and who she was with the night that Jabari was killed. So she tells him the truth. She tells him that she was with Zeke. Zeke, however, has zero common sense, and he lies to Detective Whitman about where he was. So again, this just fuels Detective Whitman's vendetta against Zeke and Carrie, and he thinks that Zeke hired somebody to kill Jabari because he was trying to hide that he was messing with Carrie. And so Zeke is held for hours. He doesn't know what he's supposed to say. He doesn't even know what's going on. And so he's just not given the right information. He also doesn't really know how to get out of the situation. He's being mind tricked by Detective Whitman, and he isn't just able to get up and just walk out of the questioning because he's not being arrested. And so he's just worried about the wrong thing and just getting easily tripped up and just not really thinking things through. And so right when he's basically about to leave, he ends up bringing up Ramirez's PBA card, which is basically a card that gives kind of like special privileges to the person who has it. They're supposed to give it to the police who are arresting them or stopping them, and then they're supposed to, like, I guess, call that person and have them come deal with the situation, or just treat that person a little bit differently now that they know that that person is affiliated with police officers. And so this is a big mistake because Ramirez is missing, and this actually ties Ramirez to the Tejada family, because we already know that Ramirez was working for the Tejadas, but they haven't been able to make that connection. And so just him giving that PBA card to Detective Whitman is a huge big mistake that he has made. And so this is on everyone's fault as far as Monet, Drew, Diana, and Kane, because they literally did not even think to loop Zeke in on what was happening. And so while he's being interrogated by Detective Whitman, Monet is off and she's being wined and dined by Mecca, and so she misses all of his calls, and so she shows up after all of this has happened. She's able to get Zeke out of it, and she bosses up on Detective Whitman about how to talk to her, about how he's treating Zeke and threatening his job. And so they're walking out of there. Davis is already there because Tariq has called him. Tariq found out from Lauren what was happening. Zeke was messing around with some girl when Detective Whitman came to arrest him. So there's actually a video of him kind of being taken away by the police. And so Tariq finds out, calls Davis, and Davis is already there to help them. And they end up leaving out the back door, and Davis speaks to the press who is outside and have gotten wind that Zeke is there. And so he's just trying to reassure them that Zeke is not in trouble, he didn't do anything wrong, and he's just trying to actively assist in the investigation. So the next thing I want to talk about is Tariq in court. So we know that Tariq is a beast in the court. So there's 2 different situations I want to talk about. First, he's able to trick Carrie into testifying in Lauren's place. So we know that Tariq is in school, and so he has a class, and Carrie is leading that class, and she's talking about basically integrity and like protecting the people that are doing things for you. And she gets a call that Lauren's in danger. Tariq has already left the class at this point, and so she goes to Lauren's dorm looking for her. Tariq is already there, and he's able to manipulate her into thinking that she put Lauren in this position, which she did, and that she needs to get her out of it and basically take her place. And so Haley is willing to do this. She goes to Jenny Sullivan and says, hey, I know just as much as Lauren does. Put me on the stand. And this is a huge mistake for Carrie to make, because she's thinking that she knows more than she does, and she's thinking that she's able to basically manipulate everyone like she has already so far, and they're just able to eat her up over this. And so what happens is that Davis is questioning her, and he basically brings up how she has history with Zeke, with Jabari, with Detective Whitman, and himself, and then he just makes everyone question her professionalism, her integrity, and he completely destroys her on the stand. And so this isn't the win that Carrie thinks it is, and she ends up later that night getting a call from her boss saying, hey, let's talk in the morning, and obviously she's about to be fired. So then we have Monet coming in. Carrie thinks that she's bonding with Monet over what happened, about losing everything and all of this stuff. And then obviously what happens next is Monet kills Carrie and makes it look like a suicide. The other court situation that is a big win for Tariq is that Braden is forced to testify. What happened is there was some witness that they had, the DA had, that Tariq and his team were able to blow up, so they needed to find another way to kind of get a win in this case. So they end up going to the West End, and they have footage of Braden and Trace with Kane, and they also have footage of Detective Ramirez, I think, and basically they know that something happened between the three of them, the four of them. And so Trace is just telling everything. He's given way more information than he should. Braden is trying to shut him up, and basically the father is able to get them a deal to have immunity regardless of what happened. And so Trace is supposed to testify. Braden at the last minute steps in for Trace's spot, and he testifies that he was the one behind the drug dealing, and then he presents the paperwork showing that he is the president of the LLC that they set up earlier in the season. And so this effectively gets Tariq off of the hook, because somebody else has admitted to being the drug dealer and being involved with everything shady kind of happening on campus. And this gets Tariq off of the hook, and then obviously Braden can't be prosecuted for any of this because he has immunity. So next, moving on to Diana. So now we have learned that Diana has gotten Lorenzo out of jail. Again, we learned earlier on that she was the one who took the money from the bar safe to pay the lawyers to get Lorenzo out of jail. He was gotten out of jail based on a technicality with something with the prosecution when he was arrested. So this forces Monet to the sidelines, like really badly. She doesn't like not being in charge. She doesn't like the way Lorenzo is treating her and just handling everything. He's also really favoriting Diana and just kind of being nicer to the kids than he is being to her. And so he's just an overwhelming presence to have in the house. He's fighting with Kane about who should be next in charge. He doesn't think it should be Kane, but then he's also pushing Drew and trying to develop him in terms of being the next person in line. So he doesn't like who Drew is hanging out with. And then he also has an issue with Zeke at his welcome home party, and he basically doesn't want Zeke there, and he should know that Zeke is like Monet's cousin or whatever, or nephew, and he's just trying to get Zeke out. Zeke kind of has to argue why he's there and all of this stuff, and so we can see that that is kind of going to be a problem. And I want to bring up one thing that I think is relevant, because we know that Mecca and Monet at this point have had a prior relationship. We do find out that Mecca wants Monet to run away with him. He's willing to provide financially for her kids, even Zeke. And so I think that this makes him a much more attractive option than Lorenzo, just because Lorenzo doesn't like Zeke hanging around. And obviously, we do find out that Zeke is Mecca's son, and so this just ties it in a little bit better as far as why Mecca is kind of like hanging around so much, because he doesn't know that Zeke is his son at first, but when he finds out, in my opinion, it just makes him more likable. And so he wants to meet Zeke. Monet is trying to put him off on this and all of that stuff. And we find out earlier in the season that Kane and somebody else, Kane, Drew, and basically Monet's people, they rob Mecca, they steal a ring that's really valuable, and they also steal weapons and like money and drugs from him. And so as a result of this, Mecca basically keeps Cain captive in his apartment. Monet comes out and she realizes that Mecca is the connect that Cain was trying to put her on with. And so they end up kind of making peace over this, because Mecca is obviously not going to do anything to Cain because he knows that that is Monet's son and he doesn't want to hurt Monet. So they basically come out with a plan. They come up with a plan to have Monet leave Lorenzo. She is going to bring the kids with her. Everything is set up for them. But what happens is that Tariq, when they robbed Mecca, Tariq had a bag that has a bunch of cash in it, and it has passports and documentation. So Tariq finds out that Mecca is a informant, and Mecca is a character from OG Power. I can't really recall everything that happened with him, but he basically put away a lot of drug dealers, being that he was an informant. So Tariq tells this to Monet kind of as his way to get away from her and get from under her thumb and just kind of be able to do his own thing. He's also blackmailing Mecca for $2 million so that he can continue to pay for everything that he needs to pay for. They come up with a plan to kill Mecca based on this knowledge. They had previously planned to kill Lorenzo so that they could run away together. They also wanted Cain to be the one to kill Lorenzo. And this is kind of a ironic moment, because when Monet is trying to convince Cain to kill his father, she brings up that Tariq killed his father and that they need to kind of like connect on how to handle that situation. And just a really weird conversation to have. And so they flip the plan to kill Mecca instead of Lorenzo. They don't tell Cain so that he is believable when he's approaching Mecca about how to kill Lorenzo. And so that brings us to the end of the season. So the season ends with Zeke being shot. And a lot of things played into this happening. First, no one even told Zeke what was happening, so he was literally in the wrong place at the wrong time. I blame all of this on Diana, and I'm so mad that she wasn't called out for her role in any of this happening. So we have Zeke almost outing Monet for killing Carrie. He goes to Detective Whitman, and it seems like he wants to tell him something, but he changes his mind, and he leaves, and he decides that he's going to get on the plane to run away with Monet and Mecca, because he thinks that this is still happening. We obviously know that there's a plan to kill Mecca instead, and we know that the people who are involved in this are supposed to meet back at the house. We also know that Diana was given the bag with the cash, with the passport, with the documentation, and she wasn't supposed to look in that bag, but she did, and she was able to figure out the contents of everything that was in the bag, and obviously it pointed to Monet wanting to run away with Mecca. And so Lorenzo, I don't think, knew about this part. He just knew that they were supposed to kill Mecca. So he still thinks that Monet is kind of running away with Mecca, or that at the very least that Mecca is going to kidnap them and take them away. And so Lorenzo goes to the hangar, and he sees a car pull up. He realizes that there's only one person in the car. He tracks them to the jet, and he just shoots them, and he runs off. And so later on the news, it is showing that Mecca was killed in his penthouse. And so Lorenzo realizes that he killed the wrong person, because the person that he killed was at the hangar, was getting ready to get on the jet. And so this was a huge thing to happen, because one, nobody again loops Zeke into what was happening. We have Diana, who's 100% to blame, because one, she outed that Zeke was not really their cousin, that he was Monet's oldest son. So this obviously caused a huge fallout, and this is part of why Lorenzo didn't trust Monet as far as whether or not she was going to run off with Mecca. We also have Diana outing Zeke's real age. So everyone thought he was 19, but he was actually 23. I don't really get the whole storyline as far as why they made him younger than he actually was, but this is a huge deal because it effectively ruins his basketball career. Everyone's thinking that he's 19 years old, but he's actually 23. And so Zeke is, at this point, is trying to get away from everything, and he holds a press conference saying that he's dropping out of school basically, and he's just going to focus on basketball. But everyone, while he's having the press conference, everyone is getting tips that his age is off, and so the press conference basically blows up in his face, and so he's at this point where he's lost Carrie, she's dead, Monet has killed her, he knows this, but he's also getting a fresh start in terms of running off with Monet and Mecca, and so that is why he is at the jet. And again, nobody told him anything about the plan to run away, nobody told him anything about the plan changing, and so this was everyone's fault, but mainly it was Diana's fault because she let the cat out of the bag, and then she continued to reveal things that put other people in danger. And so I just really hope that Diana has to make amends for this, and that she has to deal with the fallout from this once people realize how actively involved she was in setting everything in motion. And so that is the wrap up for season 2. I hope you guys enjoyed this recap and some of my opinions on everything that was happening, and I can't wait to see you for the recap and review of season 3. Bye everyone.